process circulating and percolating. It's time to get into it right now. My first guest is a civil rights attorney, a former federal prosecutor, and an MS Now legal analyst. He writes the What Matters Now newsletter on Beehive, and you can catch him on his podcast, The Brothers Briefing. He is joined by a former Arizona police officer turned conservative YouTube political commentator and host of the Officer Tatum podcast. Please welcome to the show Charles F. Coleman Jr. and, of course, Officer Brandon Tatum. Good afternoon, fellas. How y'all doing? How's everything?
Good. Hello, brother. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Charles Coleman Jr., let's start off with you. What can you tell us? I mean, the Nolan Wells case has been in the news for nearly 3 weeks now. For those who may not be aware of the case or have not kept up with the facts, just to recap, he was an 18-year-old college football player from Ocean Springs, Mississippi. On July 14th, a group of friends traveled by private boat to Horn Island, an uninhabited barrier island off the Mississippi coast. Wells was the only black person on the boat. Wells was last seen on the island around 3 p.m. His friends returned to the mainland without him, and as a result, ultimately, a couple of days later, he was found dead. Charles Coleman Jr., at this particular juncture, what's on your mind in terms of this case? What's missing? What are your thoughts?
Well, Stephen A., we just saw the family release their independent autopsy results yesterday, which were conducted by Dr. Roger Mitchell, who is the president of the National Medical Association. And those results were inconclusive. They were able to establish that Nolan Wells did not die by accident, that he did not die of natural causes, but at the same time that they were not able to establish that this was a homicide. In fact, those results established that it was not a homicide. Now, one important caveat to note is that the chief medical officer from the state of Mississippi, the sheriff's office, removed the throat from Nolan Wells' autopsy when their autopsy was conducted first. We have not heard the results of the state's autopsy, but we know that when Roger Mitchell examined the body for the family, that the throat and other organs had been removed. So that your listeners understand, that's not abnormal. That is something that takes place normally during the case of an investigation and of an autopsy. So there's nothing that was wrong there. But at this point, Dr. Roger Mitchell, who did the independent autopsy from the family, has not been able to confirm any sense of foul play as of yet that was undecided or undecisive. That does not mean that foul play may not have occurred. It just means that the autopsy that was conducted by the family did not show that conclusively. We saw some trauma to, potential trauma to Nolan Wells' head. That was not something that he was able to explain as being the result of foul play. And we have yet to hear the state's autopsy and what they found and what their findings were. You may recall, and listeners may recall, that initially the sheriff's office said that they had no reason to suspect that foul play was afoot. And what I would say that this autopsy confirms from the family is that while that cannot be certainly confirmed, it still can't be ruled out. But finally, there are 60 witnesses that have been interviewed in the course of this investigation by the sheriff's office. There's likely going to be a presentation to the grand jury, and we don't know what the toxicology report will show from Nolan Wells because much of that is in the hands of the state. But as of right now, this is where things stand, and as a former prosecutor, I want to know what the state's autopsy is going to say and what are the witness accounts that they are going to put forward in the grand jury.
Officer Tatum, you personally interviewed, you traveled to Mississippi, from my understanding, to personally interview one of the young men who left the island without knowing. Why should the public trust whatever account is coming from them right now, in your estimation, based on what you've learned? First things first, I should say that. First things first, what did you deduce from the conversation you had from one of the friends that was with Nolan Wells? What did you take away from that you'd like the public to know?
Well, Stephen A., I want to make sure this is clear. I actually spoke to all the boys that were being accused. I spoke to the family members. I spoke to also their attorneys. It's just that the one young man had the, I wouldn't say courage, but others had reasons why they didn't want to come on the camera. But he was able to come on the camera, and I interviewed him, and I also interviewed another young man who was black, who was there, who had his own personal account of what happened. I'm not asking people to believe or not believe. I just wanted to give people the information. So nobody had heard from the young boys. Nobody had heard their account, and a lot of misinformation was put out there. So some intentionally, some maybe not intentionally, but it was very detrimental and not conducive for the investigation in the Nolan Wells death. It was punitive. They came out and started with race. It had to be something nefarious because these boys were white or for any other reason. So I wanted to go out and hear the full story, and what I deduced from the interview and talking to everybody is that these young boys had nothing to do with what ended up happening to Nolan Wells, and also they were best friends. I mean, these kids had so many pictures, so many text messages of them being closer to Nolan than any other friend group. And also one thing that shocked me was that this was an island not included, not an island with 5 or 6 people on it. It was an island where there were thousands of people there, hundreds of boats, and also a lot of people could verify the statements that was made from some of these young men. So I really wish that we could have started at a point to say, what happened to Nolan Wells? Let's work together as a community. Let's talk to these young men, talk to other people, and let's find out what happened to Nolan instead of jumping the race.
Officer Tatum, how do you know that it was misinformation that was put out there? How did you come to the conclusion that something was misinformation? Explain that. Is it just
I knew it was.
did they account for something else?
No, initially I knew it was hogwash because when Al Sharpton and them got on TV, they automatically made an inference to say, well, it was something that had to happen because these kids were white. It was one white kid with one black boy. I mean, there's no evidence to project that unless you believe every white person is nefarious in their dealings with black people. And so I thought that was suspicious on his face. And then they said that Nolan was the only black kid. He was not the only black kid. Many of his black friends were also at the island with him. So, some of those things that started to come out, I knew that they were not being truthful about what happened.
Charles, your thoughts, your response to what Officer Tatum just said?
I don't necessarily know that the initial statements about Nolan being with some of his white friends is entirely afactual. I also don't know that it is a nefarious statement in as much as these are facts. He was with a number of different white boys, or a number of different boys who are white. I think that the problem with what Officer Tatum has just pointed out is that there is an underpinning of race when you're having a conversation about the types of things that happen, but have happened to black boys and black people in Mississippi, such that it cannot be summarily dismissed. I did not necessarily jump to any conclusion, but the history of what race relations have been in Mississippi and how we have not necessarily been safe has caused me to take a special look at this case. It doesn't mean that I'm accusing anyone of anything. It doesn't mean that I do not believe in finding the process. But at the same time, I am not going to ignore the facts, which you just pointed out. These are facts. He may have been with other black people, but we have seen the pictures, we have seen the photos. There were a number of people who were gathered out there for the July 4th holiday, but Nolan Wells was with 3 boys who happened to be white. Those are facts. He was with, but the thing is that it's facts without context. He was with more than just 3 white boys. That's the problem. There was over 20, 30 kids that got on 3 boats, and they all went to the island together. They didn't just travel with Nolan and just these 3 boys. Many of the boys that they're accusing, including Warren, wasn't even on the boat with Nolan when Nolan went out to the island. So some of those things were mischaracterizations of what actually happened. And the thing is that I don't think it's fair to say, because history has shown in part that white people or black people have had injustices, that all of a sudden you project that into a new situation. Black people have done nefarious things to other black people. Does that mean that you automatically jump to saying, oh, black people must be wrong in this situation? Because he had his black friends there too, and why nobody's questioning him? Why nobody's saying, oh, why did the black friends rescue him? What did the black kids know about Nolan? And many of them said that they saw him last when the white boys had left at 4:30. So I just think that the race should never be interjected. Nolan's friends told me, and they proved to me that they were really close to him, and they were some of his best friends. They said Nolan would have been incredibly upset at the way people are framing his death and going after his friends with no evidence.
Officer Tatum, hold on, Charles. I would say this to you, Officer Tatum. I get where you're coming from. And by the way, I appreciate the context and I appreciate the reporting on your part. Because numerous reports that I had read was talking about how he was the only black kid there. He was a black kid with a few white boys. And you articulating that fact is very, very important. I think that's important and fair to point out. But what do you say to folks that will ask this kind of a question? He's on a boat. He's on an island. And according to numerous reports, he talked about staying behind and traveling back with a different set of company. Yet his car keys and his phone was left on the boat that he had traveled to those guys with. So what teenager do you know to say he's staying someplace, but he's going to leave his car keys and his phone on the boat with the guys that he arrived at the island with? That does seem a bit suspicious, particularly when the guy's mother, Nolan Wells' mother, had to use some app to locate the phone, and it was something that wasn't given back. These are reports. I'm not pretending to know, Officer Tatum. These are what the report said. What do you say to that?
And this is where I feel like Benjamin Crump and them should be sued for them putting out this information without facts. Let me point the facts out. Without context, it sounds bizarre. But when you put it in the context that a lot of people left their phones on the boat that left. Many kids came to get their phones after they left the lake. Nolan was with a girl. It's not shocking that Nolan would have said, hey man, you guys have to leave, because they had to leave in an emergency situation. It wasn't like they had time to prep and everything. The boat was sinking, so they had to go, and they told Nolan, get on the boat, get on the effing boat, man, let's go. And he's like, nah, I'm finna hang out with this girl. I saw evidence of that, and others who had sent messages that I read that said that they